Alright, so for the first two questions here, you're just solving the equations. So for number one, if you imagine your two layers, your inner layer is the 0.8x, outer layer is the plus 85.3. So we're going to subtract 85.3 from both sides. We get 0.8x equals 69.7, and then we're going to divide both sides by 0.8, and you should end up with x equals 87.125, which is choice D. For the second one, there was two ways that we could do this. The first way we talked about was by doing the distributive property. So 5 times x is 5x, and 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. And then we would solve that two-step equation. So add 30 to both sides, divide both sides by 5. The other method we talked about was if we have something like this, and we remember that the distributive property is really just multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division, so I could divide both sides of this equation by 5. The 5s would cancel out. I'd be left with x minus 6 on this side, and then 45 divided by 5 is 9, and then I would just have to add 6 to both sides, so x would be 15. Either way you do it, you should still get the same answer. Alright, so what we're doing today is just reviewing for your quiz tomorrow. So the first thing that you need to be able to do is solve equations and inequalities, and then after that you need to be able to take a word problem and write your own equation or inequality and solve. So for our first example here, we're just solving this inequality, and the reminder there is peel the onion, the layers of your equation or inequality. So our inner layer is the 0.05t, and our outer layer is the plus 30. Alright, so the first thing I need to do is the outer layer. So I'm going to subtract 30 from both sides, so those are going to cancel, and I get 0.05t is less than 30. Alright, so then we would divide both sides by 0.05, and we would get t is less than 600. Alright, the second question, very similar to the second one on the do now, where one method would be doing the distributive property, but this says which steps can be used to solve for x, and if I look, distributive property is not one of those steps. Alright, so we said our other method of solving something like this would be to think of it as multiplication, so we could divide both sides of this by 3/4, so that's going to be choice A. Alright, so I'll have you guys try to do this one by either doing the distributive property or starting by dividing both sides of this by 4/5. Alright, so take a minute to do that. And then if we actually solve it, if I divide both sides by 4/5, those are going to cancel, so I get x plus 3 equals, and then 10 divided by 4/5 is 12.5. And then our last step would be to subtract 3 from both sides. So I'm going to be left with x equals 9.5. Now when you go to take your quiz tomorrow, anytime that you solve an equation, you're going to want to check your answer to make sure that you have the correct answer. So for the check, we write down our original equation. We replace the x with our answer, so I'll have 4/5 times 9.5 plus 3 equals 10. And then you're typing this into your calculator, and it should give you 10. If you don't get the same number on both sides, that's how you know that you've made a mistake, and you need to go back and correct your mistake. The other thing that's on the quiz tomorrow, like I said, is taking a word problem and writing your own equation or inequality to solve it. So our steps when we do that are right here. So first, figure out what you're being asked to find. Choose a variable and write a let statement. Write an equation or an inequality that represents the problem. One big thing there is if it's a show your work question, you have to make sure if it says to write an equation, that you're writing an equation with an equal sign. If it says inequality, you're using a less than or a greater than, not an equal sign. Once you have your inequality or your equation written, then you're going to solve it. Make sure you've answered the entire question if there's like a part B or something that you've gone back and done that. And then check your solution. That's not a formal check. It's just making sure does this answer make sense for this question? So our first example says Amanda received $150 for her birthday. She decided to buy a pair of sneakers for $110. She also bought some socks that cost $9.50 per pair. Which inequality could be used to determine the number of pairs of socks S that Amanda could buy? So it's telling us S is the number of pairs of socks. So if I go back, I'm searching for wherever it's talking about the socks. So right here, socks are $9.50 per pair. So I know it's going to be $9.50S. Well, they all say $9.50S, so that doesn't really help us. Now she's also going to buy the pair of sneakers for $110. So she has to pay for the socks plus she has to pay for the sneakers. So I can rule out choice B and D because they're subtracting the price of the sneakers. And now if she has $150, she can't spend more than $150. That's all she has. She could spend less than $150 or she could spend exactly $150. So it's going to be less than or equal to, so that should be choice C, not choice A. All right, next question. Ms. Gartland bought X number of shirts for the new members of her chorus. The cost for X number of shirts, including $3.99 shipping, was $77.49. Each shirt cost $12.25. There was no sales tax on this purchase. Which equation could be used to find X? All right, so I'll stop for a minute and have you guys figure out which equation. All right, so hopefully you wrote your equation for this, and X is the number of shirts. So it says right here, each shirt is $12.25. So you should have had $12.25X plus the $3.99 shipping equals $77.49. So you should have chose D for that. All right, and the next one. Katie bought 4 sweaters that each cost the same amount and 1 skirt that cost $20. The items she bought cost a total of $160 before tax was added. What was the cost of each sweater? All right, so you could either use your multiple choice answers and test them out and see which one works, or you can write an equation and figure it out that way. All right, so I'll have you guys try to figure that out. All right, so hopefully at this point you've somehow solved this problem. So if you wrote an equation, I'm going to say let S equal the cost of each sweater. So then if I go back, it says there's 4 sweaters, so 4S, plus the 1 skirt for $20 equals $160. So then to solve that, I'm going to subtract the 20 from each side. So I'll have 4S equals 140, and divide both sides by 4, and I get 35. So you should have got choice B for that. All right. The next question here is going to be an inequality. So it says a shipping company charges a flat fee of $4 plus $2 per pound to mail a package. Steve can spend at most $15 to mail his package. What is the maximum number of pounds that Steve can mail? So we're looking for the number of pounds, so I'm going to say let P equal number of pounds. And then if I go back, it says it's going to be $2 per pound, so 2P. Now he's also got to pay the $4 fee, so plus 4. And then it says that he can spend at most $15. So he cannot spend more than 15. That's the most he can spend. So it's going to be less than or equal to 15. When we solve this, we're going to subtract our 4 from both sides. So we'll get 2P is less than or equal to 11. And then we'll divide both sides by 2. So our 2's will cancel out, leaving us with P. And then if you do 11 divided by 2, you're going to get 5.5. All right, now 5.5 is not an answer. So we got to figure out, are we going to bump this up or are we going to bump it down? So P is the number of pounds. So this is saying the number of pounds has to be less than or equal to 5.5. All right, so that means I need a number that's smaller than this. So 5 would be the biggest number, biggest whole number that would be less than or equal to 5.5. If you tried 6, you could actually plug it in here. So you could say 6 times 2 would be 12 plus the 4 would be 16. That's too much because they only have $15. So you can test it out that way also. All right, so if we look at the next one, it says Damien earns $15 per hour plowing and $12 for each sidewalk he shovels. He wants to earn more than $200 in an 8-hour workday. What is the least number of sidewalks he must shovel to reach his goal? So we're looking for the number of sidewalks. So I'm going to say let S equal number of sidewalks. So now I'm going back to the question. I'm looking for whichever number is talking about the sidewalks, which right here it says $12 for each sidewalk. So I know it's 12S. Plus, it says he also makes $15 per hour, but if we look, it says he's going to work 8 hours, so I need to do an extra step in order to get this number. So $15 an hour times 8 hours is going to be $120. So he's making $12 for each sidewalk, plus he's making $120 for that day, and it says he wants to earn more than $200. So that has to be greater than 200. All right, and then again, I'm going to solve this. So I'm going to subtract 120 from both sides. Those are going to cancel, so I'll get 12S is greater than 80. All right, and then I'm just going to divide both sides by 12. So I end up with S is greater than 6.6 repeating. All right, so now you're going to think about that and decide, okay, what is the whole number? Because we're talking about sidewalks, so he's not going to shovel 6.6 repeating sidewalks. It's got to be a whole number. So take a second and decide what the whole number is. All right, so hopefully in looking at this, you said, well, the number of sidewalks has to be greater than this, so we've got to bump that up to 7, not down to 6. All right, the next question says the bowling alley charges $5 for shoe rental and $5.50 for each game. Dan can spend at most $20. Write and solve an inequality to find the number of games Dan can bowl without exceeding $20. So one key word that I see here is that it says inequality, which means I cannot have an equal sign. It's got to be a less than, greater than, or whatever. We're trying to find the number of games, so I'm going to say let G equal number of games. All right, and then I'll stop there for a second and have you guys try to come up with the inequality and then solve that to figure out the number of games. So hopefully when you set this up, you said, all right, G is the number of games, so I'm looking for the number that's talking about the games. So right here, $5.50 for each game. $5.50G. Now you also have to pay the $5 for the shoes, and then it says Dan can spend at most $20, which means he can't go over 20, so less than or equal to 20. Okay, then we're subtracting the 5 from both sides, so we get 550G is less than or equal to 15, and then we're going to divide both sides by 550. So those are going to cancel. We get G less than or equal to 2.72 repeating. And then hopefully from there you said, all right, well, I'm not going to bowl 2.72 repeating games. I'm going to bowl some whole number of games that I'm paying for. So if the number of games has to be less than this or equal, then the biggest whole number that's less than this would be 2 games. If you're not sure whether to bump it up or bump it down, try the number. So for example, if I thought it would be 3 games, okay, I could do 3 games times $5.50 per game plus the $5 for the shoes. That's $21.50. We can't go over 20, so I would know, okay, 3 is too many, so I need to put that down to 2. On the last page here, we're going to cross off this one at the top.